I think it is possible to build relationships or get your name out there if some of you are still new and don't feel you're really seen and recognized for all the work you do. So I'm going to first talk about really, really important trying to find an opportunity to engage with the funder if you're in the process of wanting to submit. There's usually a call for proposal Zoom meeting. You should really try to attend that meeting because you get a big insight of what the funder is really looking for. Sometimes they take questions, you could put something in chat, or they're welcome to follow up with you afterwards. Emailing the program officer, I'm going to show you examples, a couple of where you could have opportunities. And even a real simple basic question, doesn't matter, just getting that email out there so they connect a person with the organization. So when your application comes in, your proposal, they've made a connection. They remember your organization. Some foundations are open for sending an email. And then if you could have a phone call and chat, it's actually a little deeper connection. That's great. Networking opportunities, going to associate fundraising professional meetings, all these getting invited to other kinds of local organization connecting collaborative engagement opportunities. You all have your either geographic location or you have your specific mission focus. So there's a couple of ways you could connect with other organizations and then with funders, take advantage of those networking opportunities. Signing up for foundation email lists. A lot of times foundations will put something out there and they'll say, join our emailing list, join them, and you get all kinds of information on the funder. They usually are giving announcements about what, let's say, the Wellness Foundation. I'm on their email list. We haven't gotten funding from them for a long time. But the bottom line is I'm seeing their trends and I'm seeing they always announce all the millions of dollars they've given away. And yes, I did a couple of grants we didn't get, but I'm seeing their trends and I'm seeing what they're funding on, what their focus is, what they seem to have passion about, and when there's shifts in leadership, program officers. A lot of these foundations, you could join their email list and you take advantage of that. Reviewing board lists, we'll go more deeper in that on the second page. So board lists, you could see that through the websites and other, oh, this funder, we're going to go after them and seeing who's on the board. And you may never know, you may see that there's a common connection. After meetings, if there is a meeting, either in person, let's say you go to the AFP luncheon and the funder's there to chat with people afterwards, take advantage and say, I'm really interested. This is what our organization does, and applying, wanted to introduce myself and thank you. You know, it's fine. Take advantage of all those opportunities. Affinity groups, there are some like Southern California grant makers that allow also community organizations to join. I attend Southern California grant makers meetings. What's really interesting about that, you can't solicit. So I don't solicit, but I hear all these grant makers talking. I go to the conferences. It's been a wealth of information to me because I'm like a fly on the wall hearing what funders are talking about and what seems to be issues that they're dealing with. So I find all that really, really fascinating. The more you could go to funding opportunities where the funders are getting together, you really are going to kind of get good insight. We already talked about joining coalitions, collaborations, attending the conferences, which your specific focus area might have a conference, and usually funders present. So that's always great. LinkedIn, a lot of the program officers, you know, they'll connect with you on LinkedIn, and then you could kind of study their profile. The other thing, meet the grant maker. I don't know how many of these are happening now in the valley. In Ventura County where I live, we used to always have a quarterly hosted from the Ventura County Community Foundation, Meet the Grant Maker. And always there were like three funders that came, a corporate funder, a family foundation, a community, another specific themed foundation that funded Southern California. That turned out to be really great for me because I was able to learn more intimately about the organization, connect with them. And I always ended up, one of those three, I usually ended up getting a grant. And we'll discuss this later more, but if a proposal has been declined that you submit, a lot of them will talk to you and give you insight why it was declined. That helps you for considering the proposal in the future. So I would take advantage of those opportunities and talk to the program officer if they're willing. Some won't, but a lot of them will take the time to tell you because it's an exchange. You've invested a lot of time to do this proposal. Program officers don't like to say no and probably are saying no to the majority of who applies because it's so competitive. So I think there's a feeling that they want to share. They want to let you know it was no reflection of the quality of your proposal. A lot of times it's the alignment issue, it's a board priority. There's a lot of reasons why your proposal wasn't able to be accepted. And some things are very concrete that you could fix. Other things, it's kind of more the quirks of the foundation and where they're going. But you gain insight. We'll start here and then we'll go back to the screen. Scroll down a little bit. Now this is Weingart. A lot of you are familiar with Weingart Foundation. Right up front, it says we don't have an open application process, but we welcome communication and contact. We're not going to link on now. Contact one of our program officers for any questions. So you could contact, you're interested in applying, and you just do a brief description of your agency and what you're thinking. And then you could also sign up for their newsletter. And then it also gives you a list. You could go and look at all the funding that they've done the last 6 months, 3 months, look at where the money is. So this is 3 really good. When I say do your homework, Weingart Foundation is like giving you a gift. You could reach out to them and talk to them. You could get their newsletter, so you see their funding trends that I talked about, and you could see where they're putting their money and how much. So you could look at alignment. If you haven't, do that with Weingart. If you haven't gotten funding from Weingart yet. And Weingart, I know, they do a lot of capacity building grants. So if it's your community based and you're about building your organization, the infrastructure, and you're supporting a really high need in community, you might have a good chance. When I say do your homework, you're going to go out for a grant, study the grant announcement. So there's 2 types. You either are soliciting the foundation, there's no formal announcement like Weingart, or you hear about a grant opportunity. Either way, you're studying the information. You're studying the webpage of Weingart, you're looking at how they're funding, you're following their directions, or you're actually following an announcement made that they're considering they're seeking out proposals. Something that happens a lot is no eligibility requirements. Is your agency eligible? Sometimes there's geographic restrictions, there's budget size restrictions, there's how much funding from public entities you could receive. Some of them, if you have more than 50% government support, they don't consider you. Irvine Foundation, I don't know if they still have that requirement. That was a big thing with Irvine. Does your mission align with the foundation's mission? Sometimes, oh, this would be a great fit, but then you study the foundation and you see they're not funding in our area and it looks like we're not really aligned. You don't want to waste your time. Also, the deadline. You think this is great, but it's due in a week and a half. Can you get the grant in? Be under this competitive deadline and knowing all these other organizations are going to apply. Can you realistically submit by the deadline? So that's really important. Sometimes you just have to say no. Terry King, who's on this call, and we were going to meet a deadline. We were all set. We were doing all our homework. We were ready, almost ready to submit. We found out last minute the faculty, in our case, that was going to be the submitter on behalf of the university for us, be the main person. He was ineligible to apply because of his faculty status. So he couldn't get the funding. So that was a little tough. It was last minute. We had to pull out. We did have an alternative plan for another faculty who could be the main person. And he said, I can't do it in a week. I can't. I need to study this more. We said, okay, there's always next year. So you have to remember that. That's okay if you can't meet the deadline. So this is Bloomberg, and this is all over the country, and they're looking for arts grants and scroll down a little bit. So deadline March 13th. So we have a little over a month. Yes, that's realistic. Eligibility. And this is now we're talking national and international. So the other thing you have to think is your organization too small to even apply for something like this. So right away they say the budget has to be at least 500,000. So they're really looking in the US. They're really looking for large impact type of organizations that are really going to be kind of introduce some kind of really change agent in existence for at least 3 years. If you're a brand new nonprofit, you're still small budget. Even if you're over 500,000, you might say it's not worth the time. What is cool, scroll down a little bit, supported projects. If you're an arts organization, this is really capacity building. I thought, wow, this is really, I am looking at it for the Soraya. I wanted to point out for capacity building, sometimes you're so much into getting funding to deliver your arts programming, you don't do these things that are really important. Creating and distributing, ticketing, you have an old ticketing system and you can't really look at the pattern of who's coming. This is really great. Digital asset management. Someone else might understand what that is better than I do. You want to build your arts website. I just thought this was a really great opportunity that they're really committed to helping arts organizations move to that next phase with taking technology in mind. What I said before on this one, dates to for like funding forums. So there's 2 opportunities, and then this is Eastern time, so you have to coordinate where Pacific time, make sure your schedule, you're on the right time frame. Because first I was going to say, oh great, I'll go that first one, and I saw it was when I clicked on it, oh, that's 6:30 in the morning. No, thank you. So that's something to think about if you are applying to an organization across the country. But I'm going to go to the funder forum, which is in 2 days, to just learn more about, and then I'm going to give my recommendation to the Soraya's artistic director. Hey, I think give it a chance, or this is what I learned. Doing your homework, taking the time really helps. It either clarifies, yes, we should apply, or it clarifies, don't waste my time. It says here to review the guidelines and apply and real quick, and then we'll go back to the PowerPoint. What was interesting about so I spent a lot of time studying this, and I don't even know if we're going to apply, but I read everything. I've kind of gone through it a couple of times. So there is a lot, when I say do your homework, there is a lot of upfront analysis work that's really, really important. It gives really their passion here, Bloomberg Arts. They really want to help you grow your revenue and engage audiences, and they see this as a way through this digital opportunities. Again, we saw what they're going to focus on and what you can. So you're going to build a budget. You can include hardware, software, vendors, staff time, training. So that's great. You don't want to put something on your budget, we'll talk later, that's not eligible. So they're saying you could do that. Timeline's important. It starts looking interesting. This is a 2-year grant, but assigned advisor, project plan, these meetings, like real intensity this first 3 months, and then implementation the second 6 months, and then the launching. So I thought, wow, what's going on here? So then there's all these components. So what's happening here is you don't want to apply for a grant that you don't have the infrastructure and capacity to do what they're asking for. And they're saying that they're going to give you a person to help work with you. They also, okay, so you're going to get a lot of support from them. Wonderful. Then you have to, next one, fellow, you have to assign one of your employees, has to be a staff member, has to be the project lead and be the fellow. And it says dedicate in the middle of the paragraph 1 to 2 days per week for the initial project during the planning phase, 3 months, and then 1 day per week for the rest of it. So you got to really realistically ask, do we have someone that we're getting 500,000, dedicate all this time to this project? Don't apply for a grant where you're not going to be able to deliver. So that's why you have to really do your homework. Organizational oversight. Then I'm like, wow, they're really asking a lot of you. Then they want you to assign a subcommittee. It could be of your board that's going to oversee the project. the board of each grant, okay, the board, so it is your board of directors, will create a subcommittee to oversee this project. I don't know if Soraya can do this, so I don't know if they could even apply, but there's all this infrastructure that they're requiring. So I thought that was interesting. And then your metrics, you have to have really tangible deliverables. So benchmarks of how you're going to measure whether you're successful. And the cool thing, if you're an arts organization, you really want to get out there, and this might be a great opportunity. You're in this huge network of other arts organizations, Bloomberg Tech Fellows. That's wonderful. I'm just studying this to show you what I do when I look at a proposal, and then I communicate to whoever is the team to say, can you do this? This is what you're going to be required to do. Is this in place? Can you put this in place? Can you make sure this happens? Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So that's when I say do your homework. So learning the background history of the funder, we didn't give a lot of attention, but up in front, Bloomberg Arts Philanthropy is talking about why this is important to them. They really want these arts organizations to grow. I didn't check out who the board members were. That might, I don't know, it's an international national organization. We're not going to have the personal connection most likely, so it could be interesting to look at it, but it might not make a difference in this case. Grant making history, I would look at the past grants and make sure your type of organization, if you're very local arts programming, let's say just your geographic region, let's say even the Valley, or maybe your LA, the whole LA region, you want to make sure you're a match. So that's where I say average grant. Well, the average grant size, we know it's going to be 500,000. The geographic focus, that would be something you're looking at for this one. We're not going to go into the guide star. I hope everyone, I don't think we have time today. I hope everyone knows to look at guide star. You could get some more information. You could look at the 990s and look at I do that history too in research. And we could, Alejandra could do a whole specific how to use look at a 990 and that at a later date. But it is important. You could get free membership, everyone, and any registered IRS nonprofit and file a 990. You could even be there without a 990 because you haven't filed for a few years, but should be on GuideStar. Your organizations should be on GuideStar. This is really looking at from how I think when I do a proposal and my tips. So as you can see, we've almost spent a half hour and we're not even in the meat of the proposal yet, because honestly, doing your homework and knowing if you're a match and really getting a feel for the organization, how it aligns with your organization is so important, and making that relationship. So it's worth the investment. Creating some kind of brief proposal outline to ensure flow, so you're not jumping all. Now we're writing the grant now, so you're not jumping all over the place is something I do. Usually up front, you do the proposal summary. I might not write that till after I do the grant, but funders really like to see a kind of short paragraph. This is what we're proposing. This is why, this is the need, and this is how much we're asking, and this is the impact we're going to have through your funding. That's kind of a nice thing that most funders ask for. So I do that after I finish the grant. Up front, usually the mission of your organization and history, and then the background on both. Now we're talking about your organization and then going into your program, because most of you, your organization and what you're asking money for are two different things, because now you're honing in on you need money for XYZ program that's part of your big organization. Why you need the support, this is extremely important. A lot of funders, it's not clear. Well, they want money, but I don't really understand why. So a really clear, articulate problem statement, or need statement. This is the need in our community, and this funding will enable us to respond to this need effectively. Impact is the same, why you need the impact. A lot of times, agency I noticed has a hard time, or I have a hard time with faculty articulating Well, you're getting this money. What difference is it going to make? Well, we need the money, but what is it doing? How is it benefiting your community? What's going to be? And I'll show you an objective where I really show an impact. So that's really important. This money will respond to this need and impact our community in this way. So the funder feels like this is a really good investment. I want to give this organization money. The objectives, it's not enough to just give objectives. A lot of times, some people write their objectives as activities, and we'll talk about more of that later. We're going to do XYZ activity. That's not your objective. Your objective is really measurable and what impact you're going to have. So you do want to be able to quantify what you're going to do in this project. Because a funder likes quantifying because they want to make sure you've done your homework and you're quantifying it, you're understanding, you're going to serve X number of people, you're going to reduce this need by X amount, X percentage, or reduce it with so many people impacted. And we're going to do it in this time frame. That's really important. And then sustaining the program. A lot of times funders, are you going to come back to us every year? How are you is this a jump start? Is this pilot and then you're going to put it in place? Is this one shot responding to some one-time crisis? Or is this a program that you want to keep going all the time? If you want to keep it going all the time, how are you going to do it in the future? Are you going to then go after government support? Is this going to be taken on as one of your other components of your organization programs? That's really important to think that through. We talked a little bit about this. So SMART objectives, specific. Has to be measurable. It has to be achievable. You don't want to say something you can't do. Realistic, again, it has to be something you could do. It's realistic. You're not going to save the planet. And time bound and what time period. I did not write a grant for this. I just made up, let me just play around with a SMART objective. So let's say CalFresh program, that's for low income people to apply and get some support for food insecurity. I don't know a lot about it, but I thought, well, let me play with that one. So CSUN student enrollment in the CalFresh program will increase by 40%. So I put a specific percentage, and then I actually quantified. So how will we know we hit it? From 100 single parent participants to 140 single parent participants by the end of 2024 calendar year. So I haven't described a program yet, but let's say we're going to target single moms at CSUN that are not enrolled in the CalFresh program so that they're not deciding whether they're going to eat or pay their tuition. That's just going to be kind of my program, my story. So this would be one very specific measurable objective. And maybe another one through an assessment, they determine that they had the means to pay their books and have money for food. I don't know. I'm just gave you one example. This is something I always make sure, and this is really important if you have a lot of people working on your grant. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time on budget because I think everyone always ignores, not intentionally, budgets sometimes get the least amount of attention and are probably the most important. But does your proposal flow? And the budget piece is part of this. Does everything you say and then what you're going to ask the money for and what your objectives are and what your problem was, does it all flow and connect? The ribbon going through or a wave going through the whole proposal. It can't just, it has to be a continuum. It has to really flow. Something that I see all the time, and probably about 85% of proposals that a faculty does for me, they haven't followed instructions and they haven't answered all the questions. So most of the time when it's a prompted proposal on a portal from a web page, which most of them are now, they'll tell you very specific questions of what they want you to answer. And you got to do that. If you don't answer all the questions and it has reviewers looking at them, you're going to be scored lower and you're not going to be considered. So you have to go through it a lot of times. When I do grants, I check off, I answered, and the bigger the grant, the more complex, the more questions. So you kind of have to check off, I did this, I did that, and I do that to make sure I'm answering all the questions. Grant proposals are very meticulous, they're very detail-oriented, they're very exact. I compare it to, being a surgeon who's doing heart surgery or something where you have to be laser-eye focused. I hate to say this, but I see a proposal as the same way. It's extremely, important that you're detail-oriented, analytical, really taking the time to answer everything and take your time to do it. So it's better you're not rushing doing a grant last minute. Take your time. You'll do a better job. You'll feel more proud of it, and the chances become higher. Typos, misspelling, look for that. Do spell check. Sometimes we think we're fine and there's misspelled words. Some funders have issues with that. We already talked about looking at the measurable objectives to make sure we're realistic. Attachments, make sure you include all the attachments they're asking for. And sometimes they ask for anything else you want to provide. I think that's a nice way to sell your organization. A one page, flyer you have that describes the programs or something you have that's really cool that brags about your agency. I think it's nice to include, or the program you're asking for, you have a report on that project. That's all great. The budget, we're going to go into that. Sometimes they don't sum right. So I like to, and I'm not a budget expert, but I always take the budget and then I do a second Excel column and I resum everything. And then you'll be surprised sometimes they're not summing right. So you want to make sure everything's summing right. And we already have been talking a lot about being the detail oriented important. So we're going to go into a couple of budget pages now because this is my real big issue. How much you should ask for first, very general. Look at the grant maker's history, look at your size of your agency and budget, how long your agency has been around, because a funder's not going to give you a bunch of money if you're a new agency. They're not going to take that kind of risk. So they'll give you a smaller grant. You've been around a long time, you're a big budget, yeah, you could ask for more. And then the full amount of the budget, you want the full program funded versus a portion of it. It's very rare that a funder will fund 100% of the budget unless it's a unique project, a pilot, or something unique. They usually want to see that you have contributions toward this program. That could be in kind. There's a lot of ways we'll get into that. That could be other funders supporting it. They don't want to be the only funder. I think you want to at least try to show 50% funded by others if that's possible. And that's where I'm talking about in kind and some others resources, maybe 60, 70, you ask for 70. You got to play around with it depending on what the project is, but definitely try to get other people supporting the program, other ways that you could contribute. Looking at your history with the funder, is this the first time you're going to them? They're not going to take as big of a risk with you versus you've gone to them a lot. So the more you've been working with this funder, the more they've gotten to know you. It's a strong relationship. You could ask more and more amount because you've delivered. The alignment, which we talked about, make sure the budget is aligned where what you've said in the grant and then how much you're asking for. And when you give your timeline, you say X person will run this program, and then you don't show the budget of that person being paid for. What happened here? They're going to look at all that. Make sure you have a nice header, the organization name. This is a kind of my thing. Some people forget to do this. The name of the project and then the time period. Is this if you don't know exactly when the grant will be funded, sometimes it's hard to do a time period to say from July 1st to June 30th. We'll just say 1-year budget. But is this a 1-year grant? Is this a 2-year grant? What is it? Is it 6 months? Give your time period. And then this is a little confusing now. You'll see it on the next page clearer. I like to always see the income amount contribution on the top. So, and to see kind of a little ballpark broken down, how much is coming from other foundations, your own organization donations, you have government contracts in kind, and then how much are you asking from the funder? And it should all add up. It's a $100,000 grant. All these categories should add up to the bottom of what your total program budget is. And then what you were asking from the funder, that should add up on the top to the bottom what your expenses are. We'll see on the next page from the funder. And make sure you have your different program expenses kind of broken in categories: personnel, program, operating, indirect costs. And we talked about contribution from others and how much you're asking for them. I just did a sample budget here. It's not all filled in. And because of the page issue of being able to see it on one page, but typically the income would be on the top and the program expenses on the bottom. But see, I made it really clear. It's a $500,000 project. 100 is coming from foundations, other foundations, private donors. You know, we get a lot of money from, let's say, private donors, 50,000. We also have government support, 100. Some of these categories you wouldn't have filled out depending on your size. I've just put it this way. I'm asking the funder 200,000. I also in kind contributions, which is other sources, is like I'm our executive director, our finance director are contributing time toward the project. That's an example of how you could do that. And then the total income. So that's all the categories. Then here's the expenditures. I really like to see, looking across, what's the total amount of the budget, who else is paying for it, what I'm asking of the funder, and then what's the total budget. And then if a board or program officer goes across, they could see. So let's say the evaluator, you need the funder to pay the whole thing. So the total evaluator cost, let's say, is 50 grand. Other sources of income, it would be 0. The funder request would be 50, and the total budget is 50. But then your project director, you have all this other money supporting it. Maybe the project director is only on at 20% time. So then you'd calculate that, and then you have your program costs. Rent, that's a great in-kind support. Maybe you don't need any money for rent, but your rent, because you actually have a lease in this area where you're doing the project, uses a quarter of the building, you could make that your in kind and have a really nice chunk of money. So it's really, I just put a couple of categories. And then indirect costs, like on our campus, 5% of every budget is indirect. So in this case, 25,000, 5% would be go on to the CSUN Foundation, which administers the income and manages the grant. So some people have a standard 12% indirect costs. We have 5%. I would suggest looking at the guidelines. Sometimes they don't allow indirect costs. Make sure they do. And if they do you have a policy at your organization, what your indirect is? If not, don't go above 10, 12%, I think looks good. Okay, that's just a quick budget. I hope that helped. This, you wouldn't believe, is a huge issue that funders see all the time. The budgets aren't clear. They don't make sense. They ask for money, but it's not consistent with the application, doesn't add up, all kinds of mess. They can't figure out who else is contributing to the project. Final thoughts, be sure it's well thought out. This is from an actual program officer. A lot of times, and this is true, the organization acts like no one else is doing their project. They're the only one. I heard this from a faculty the other day. I'm the only one getting grants in this college. Well, he's not. So it really turns the person, it's a negative. So don't describe your organization. You're the only one doing it. That would probably be rare because there's so much need. Make sure we've talked about this a lot, your homework. Make sure what you're asking for aligns with the funder's priority. We talked about a really clear need statement and articulate your clear steps of how you're going to accomplish that. And we talked about activities as objectives. Don't say an objectives is you're going to do X, Y, and Z action. That's how you're going to do it, get it done by this activity, but that's not your objective. Is your proposal well positioned? What I mean by that is it's strong. You look good in how you've aligned everything. You have commitment from your board and your team. You have other funding for sure committed to it. Just make sure it's all well positioned, and you want it to be clearly well thought out. I already talked about aligning the priority. You've established the relationship. I've given examples how you can do that. And if you can't, your name is known, something. The sustainability, I think, is key. And I added this. Do you have a good reputation? Because these funders talk to each other and they check you out in the community. They ask other people, what do you know about this organization? So if you haven't done your reports for other funders, if you've collaborated with someone else and didn't finish the job, you want to make sure you got a strong reputation because it will they'll see through it. You didn't file your 990 or some documents that should have been filed. That's all that you got to be careful of. I just thought this was important, and I'm sorry, we'll have 10 minutes for questions. So if you get rejected, don't see that as terrible because it's so competitive and you might have a really strong proposal, and see this as a process. Every grant you write, you get insight. Just clarifying, strengthening your program through the writing process is good. You learn things. Oh, the program's better if we do it this way. As I said in the beginning, if it's declined and there's an opportunity to meet with the funder, go for it and see how you could improve it. This return on investment. Don't let all the time you worked on this grant go to waste. So submit the proposal to someone else, refine it, submit it again, use the information to refine your program. I don't really like or believe in you do a grant, you put it on the shelf and you forget about it, yet you spent 4 weeks working on it. Make it a return on your investment all the time you invested, and really submit again, strengthen it, submit again, and don't be down. You have successes and you should be keeping a record of all your successes. So keep those documented. So we're all about what we've done well and learning from how to improve. Okay, final page. Here's my email contact information, which Alejandra will share. This was really designed in a way of what I do to submit a grant and what's important to me.